For a large part of human history, making money was not as normal as it is today. There was profit, there was trade. Merchants were transporting silk, silver, and spices across continents. But building your entire life around becoming rich, that was something that felt a bit unsettling in medieval Europe. Working hard was appreciated, but becoming wealthy from it was not always viewed positively. Putting money into interest was generally considered usury. Saving money could even be seen as greed. The ideal life was not being a successful tradesman, but living like a monk who had withdrawn from worldly matters. But later, some things began to change. Within a few centuries, certain regions of Europe became the birthplace of modern capitalism. People no longer just valued hard work, but also discipline, saving, and reinvesting their earnings. In places like the Netherlands, England, and later America, commercial ambition was no longer seen as bad, but rather as something virtuous. So what happened that led to such a transformation? The answer begins, in part, with religion. To understand this shift, we need to go back to late medieval Europe. At that time, economic life was under the strong influence of the Catholic Church. The Church shaped not only religion, but also how people thought about work, money, and responsibility. Trade was not completely forbidden. Markets existed and merchants were active in trade networks stretching from Italy to the Baltic. There were even wealthy banking families financing kings. However, the Church set clear moral boundaries on how wealth should be acquired. The most well-known example was the ban on interest. In theory, money should not generate money on its own. This may sound strange today, but it made sense in that world. The economy was largely based on agriculture, and rapidly growing debt systems could put society at risk. Medieval thinkers were concerned that uncontrolled borrowing would trap people in dependency. For this reason, wealth was not entirely rejected, but it was not particularly celebrated either. What was praised instead was humility, generosity, and distance from material ambition. Monasteries were the strongest symbols of this worldview. Monks lived lives devoted to prayer and service, away from worldly concerns, and were seen as spiritually superior. Still, real life was more complicated. For example, there were wealthy families like the Medici. In the 15th century, they built one of the most powerful financial institutions in Europe. They financed kings, merchants, and even the papacy. Yet even they seemed to feel a kind of moral discomfort about their wealth. That's why they donated generously to churches, hospitals, and charitable causes, almost as if trying to create a balance. In short, money was powerful, but it was not enough on its own. It always needed a moral justification. Then, in the 16th century, things began to shift. In 1517, Martin Luther emerged and criticized the Church, especially the sale of indulgences. His movement quickly grew into what became known as the Protestant Reformation. This didn't just change religion, it also changed how people viewed everyday life. One of the most important changes was about the concept of work. In the Middle Ages, religious life was considered superior to ordinary labor. But Luther challenged this idea. According to him, everyone could serve God through their work, not just clergy, but everyone. This was a major turning point. Suddenly, ordinary jobs gained meaning. Being a farmer, a blacksmith, or a merchant, all were valuable. Work was no longer just about making a living. It became a kind of calling. This idea alone didn't create capitalism, but it changed how people thought. Work was no longer just necessary. It became meaningful. Then John Calvin took this idea even further. In his teachings, predestination was central. God had already decided who would be saved, and people could not change that. This led to an unsettling question. Am I among the chosen? There was no clear answer, so people began to look for signs. Being disciplined, living an orderly life, working hard, these gradually came to be seen as signs of moral seriousness. But importantly, wealth itself was not considered holy. On the contrary, excessive luxury was still viewed negatively. This created a unique lifestyle. Work hard, earn money, but don't waste it. Save it and reinvest it. Today, we call this capital accumulation. Instead of spending your earnings immediately, you reinvest them to generate more wealth. This model was incredibly powerful. Money kept growing. Businesses expanded, trade increased, and the economy developed rapidly. Years later, Max Weber studied this phenomenon and made an important observation. According to him, Protestantism did not create capitalism, but it helped lay the groundwork by changing how people thought about work and money. The effects of these ideas were especially visible in the Netherlands. Despite being a small country, it became one of the most powerful trading centers in the world during the 17th century. Amsterdam became the financial heart. The Dutch worked hard, earned well, but avoided showing off. Instead of spending money, they managed it. England followed a similar path. In 1694, the Bank of England was established. Trade expanded, the financial system developed, and London became a major center. This culture eventually spread to America. The Puritans, in particular, placed great importance on hard work, discipline, and the efficient use of time. These values were passed down through generations, eventually contributing to the rise of a powerful capitalist economy in the United States. Of course, capitalism did not develop only in Protestant societies, but Weber's insight still matters. Economies are shaped not only by technology and laws, but also by beliefs. When people begin to see work, productivity, and earning money as morally right, the economic system changes accordingly. In the end, the key idea is this: financial systems are built not just on money, but on what people believe. If this gave you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want more content like this, be sure to like. History exists because of answers,